Hello there! This video goes into an overview of non-probability sampling or convenience and quota sampling. And because non-probability sampling relies on volunteers, this lecture will also dig into some tips and examples of recruitment. So I'll start by covering convenience and quota sampling, then we'll jump into recruitment, and then I'll give you an opportunity to test your knowledge and think about it. So non-probability sampling, or convenience sampling, is more common and more simple than random selection and behavioral sciences research because it does not require access to the entire population. And typically we don't have access to the entire population in behavioral sciences and human subjects and social sciences research. So convenience sampling is essentially studying who or whatever is available, who is willing. And it's usually the only available technique. For me, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, so a lot of my research is focused on employees and also students, and I can't study every employee and every student. So, for example, many studies in psychology involve samples of Psych 101 students at research universities who are required to participate in research as part of a course requirement. Another example would be, to date, my scholarship of teaching research on reducing anxiety, building skills, and increasing sense of belonging among students really relies on samples of students who have taken statistics classes with me, right? Very convenient. I have access to them easily. So, of course, the benefit of this is the convenience of it, especially if you post a survey online through services like MTurk that give you easy access to thousands of people who take surveys to earn money. But a downside of convenience sampling is that you may end up with a sample that's not representative of the population. So think about how people who make money on MTurk taking surveys may differ from the population and how they may rush through the survey to earn more money by being able to take more surveys, right? Also thinking about the effectiveness of a new personality test for predicting job performance among employees who volunteer. So probably those employees that volunteer to take part in the study are probably going to have different personalities, performance, and perceptions than non-volunteers, right? So those who volunteered to do the study may be more conscientious, more open, maybe even more conformist, and maybe just care more about the organization in general. So they're probably going to have better performance in general, and they're not going to represent all of the employees. Another example, if we want to look at group first collaborative testing and we saw that it significantly reduced test anxiety among my statistics students, but maybe collaborative testing doesn't function in the same way or have the same benefits as collaborative testing in less technical classes. So just thinking about the limitations of convenience sampling, even though it's very commonly used, and sometimes it's really the only option that we have. Another type of non-probability sampling that's also related to convenience sampling is quota sampling. So quota sampling is a great strategy for maximizing the representativeness of a sample or increasing the external validity with a convenience sample. Quota sampling involves setting a cutoff for how many members of each group or strata, like stratified random sampling, that you will include in your sample. Researchers should only focus on quotas for groups that are relevant to the variables in their hypothesis. So for example, if I was studying the effects of a belongingness intervention on Marshall University students, and past research suggests that first-generation college students, who are the first in their family to go to college, tend to feel less of a sense of belonging, then you better make sure that your sample includes a fair amount of first-generation college students. So if I was going to do equal quotas, I would want to make sure that I had equal representation across the groups in the sample. So for instance, I would want to have 50% first generation and 50% continuing education students in my sample. If I was doing a proportionate quota, then the proportions in my sample would need to reflect the proportions in the population. So if the university had 40% first-gen college students and 60% continuing generation students, then the sample will too. And so you can kind of see here as an example, if they were taking that survey and we already had enough continuing generation college students and they went to take the survey, they would just get taken right to a thank you message and they wouldn't be allowed to participate. So a benefit of quota sampling is that it can create a sample that has the same proportions of group membership in terms of demographics or other important grouping variables as the population. And you can make sure that it can have equal representation of groups if you wanted to do that as well. A downside of quota sampling is that refusing participants is a waste of a data collection opportunity, especially in online surveys, and especially since larger samples tend to be more representative. So it's kind of hard to turn people away just because you've already met the quota. Perhaps the best solution is targeted recruitment to individuals of interest in the population that are from smaller groups, and then monitor the number of participants from those groups or volunteers from those groups. Then just continue data collection until enough members of those smaller groups are included in the sample. So for example, you could leave a survey open longer or extend clinical trials and target recruitment in places where less represented groups will see it. So because convenience sampling relies on volunteers, we are going to take a look at how to recruit volunteers for research. So here are some of my tips for recruitment when it comes to getting people to participate in research. So make sure that you record the survey recruitment source in your data to make sure that you can kind of figure out if the recruitment source had an effect on your results. So you can ask participants where they heard about the study or use different leaks for each recruitment source, like if you're doing online surveys or experiments. And this allows you to examine and statistically control for any of those differences in your results, again, that are based on that recruitment strategy or recruitment source. It's also important to recruit in a variety of ways. So using flyers, videos, and personal interactions to make sure that you get the best outreach possible. It's also important to target recruitment toward underrepresented groups of interest. It's better than just having a quota and hoping to meet it. Actually make sure that you are targeting your recruitment not only in places where those underrepresented people will be, but also presenting your recruitment ads in a way that will resonate with them. Also be sure to provide adequate information so that people can make an informed decision as to whether or not they want to participate in the study. So you'll notice that some of these are kind of tied into the ethics, right, of making sure that your sample reflects the population and that everybody has equal access, and making sure that you give people information and treat them with respect and beneficence and justice so they can make an informed decision about participating in the research or taking the survey. So you want to let people know about the purpose, so why the study matters and who it will help. So for instance, you could say, this study will help the university have a better understanding of why students feel like they do or do not belong in college. Also include the restrictions in your recruitment ads, so who should and should not participate. So maybe only first-year students taking classes full-time at the university should participate. Also include any incentives and rewards or direct benefits of participation. So for instance, students who complete the survey will be emailed a $5 Starbucks gift card. Just make sure, again, that your incentives aren't overly coercive and enticing so that people can still volunteer and not volunteer and don't feel like they must do it because the reward is so great. Also be sure to include the requirements in your recruitment materials. So what participation will involve, right? So you could say, take this 5-minute multiple choice survey and get paid $1 a minute, right? If you're going to give them that $5 Starbucks gift card. So now I'm going to show you some examples of what a recruitment advertisement can look like. So this comes from a study that was conducted by my colleague at Nevada State, and they wanted people to wear a camera around their neck, and it would take pictures randomly throughout the day, and then they had researchers content analyze those photos and see how those interactions and what they were doing was correlated with measures of personality they completed on a survey. That's asking a lot of participants, right? It's a little bit of an invasion of privacy. And my colleague actually did have difficulty getting IRB approval for this study. But you'd be surprised how many people she was able to recruit by offering them some gear, right? So lunch boxes and squishy brains and pencils. That was a good enticement to get people to actually participate in the research beyond just, helping with psychological research on campus. Here's another example from LinkedIn where my other colleague posted an invitation to participate in focus group research, which I actually participated in, to look at people's experiences of the Great Resignation. So if you can see there, it kind of tells you the purpose of the research, what it's going to be like to participate, and then gives you information for how to participate as well. LinkedIn is a great source for recruiting professionals. Here's an example from my experimental psychology class. They helped me develop a survey and recruitment materials for Shawnee Counseling Center staff and employees. And they had a great idea that they could entice people to participate in the survey by offering them like a free movie day or a free movie ticket for participation. Here's an example of one of the emails that went out for the Nevada State Organizational Climate Survey that I was a part of. And we started using memes and cuteness to get people to participate, which I think really is part of the reason why we had such great external validity, especially for our full-time sample. But you can see an example here, right? Please help, we can't do this without you. There wasn't a lot of information here, but they had already been bombarded with information about the climate survey at this point, and this was just kind of our last-ditch effort to get those lingering people to participate. Here you can see what a recruitment ad would look like for some of my Scholarship of Teaching research, where I offered students extra credit to participate in a survey that was designed to kind of assess how they were feeling about the class. You can also see that at the end there, in accordance with ethical guidelines, I gave them an alternate assignment to do to get the extra credit if they didn't feel comfortable participating in my research. But you'll see that I provided a lot of information about what we were studying and what participation would entail. So I'm going to end this video by giving you an opportunity to flex your new knowledge and see if you can identify what type of sampling technique is being used in this example, and maybe think about how the strategy could be improved. So take a moment, pause this video, think about it, and then play to hear the answer. All right. So in this example, the LGBTQ+ office at Marshall University is doing a survey and some focus groups to look at those MU student attitudes and perceptions about campus resources for the LGBTQ+ community. They posted flyers all over campus and gave a QR code so students could just scan it and take the survey. This is most definitely a convenience sample. And you know, because they're relying on volunteers, and in this scenario, there's no mention of having access to the entire population. Now, they may be using a quota here, right? They may just refuse people to take the survey if they aren't part of the community after they get so many, but you don't know that from this. So this strategy could be improved. If they're not using a quota, then you could use that quota, right? And you could just make sure that you have enough members of the LGBTQ+ community in the sample, and you could leave the survey open until you meet the quota for them. If you wanted to make sure that people who are not members of the LGBTQ+ community also take the survey, maybe create multiple versions of this flyer to appeal to all students, right? The LGBTQ+ office and the rainbows may make people who aren't part of that community feel like the survey isn't for them. So not only being careful with your sampling strategy, but also the recruitment strategy. So I hope that you feel like you learned a lot about non-probability convenience sampling, and not only you would feel prepared to use it in your own research, but you know the limitations of that type of sampling when you go out into the world and read about other people's research as well.